Hi guys, welcome back. We are day number 9 now. So 9 in the month of January. So we're going to go through to like 31 of these videos. So bear with me and sit along. Okay, title of today's video. Next part of what I'd like to do with most people is teach them about what I'm going to call the seasons. Now what I mean by the seasons is this. So if you're into sports in any way, shape or form, particularly team-based sports, the likes of football, soccer, NFL, basketball, you name it, you typically find there are seasons. Now, whilst we don't really talk about that much here in Australia, and we tend to be, we're either playing or we're not playing, the more professional that you get and the better that you get at your sport, then you will find that you will start to implement what we call seasonality. So, a bit like summer, autumn, winter, spring, there is the pre-season where we get ready. We are then in season where we are doing the work and the games. There is the post-season where we're coming off the high of being successful or otherwise. And then there is the off-season. Now typically what will happen is this. Most people go, bugger a pre-season, I'll just do a bit of a warm-up and I'm in. Then they go into season, and then what typically happens is people get hurt. Or in our case here, we're talking about planning and lifestyle, people give up. The post-season, people don't think about paring it down, they just stop and they give up again. So therefore that leads us into the off-season where they will switch off completely. What I'm talking about is seasons, and implementing seasons or phases in your training is to make sure that you cycle through not only the emotional roller coaster that you're potentially going to go on and the physical one, but there's also not only an emotional part of that, there's also time where, as we said before, we've built in breaks. We've talked about restore and resetting. We've talked about all the other things that we need to do so far. So seasonality is this. So in my in-season, when I'm doing the work, in my book, I've got 3 sides of a triangle, what we call the triangle of awareness. Thank you to the guys at NCI. Good way to explain this. And that is, at each of those apexes, there is something that I'm going to say is in season. It is either performance based, therefore I'm working on a sport. It might be aesthetic based, therefore I might be looking a look, I might be trying to get lean, I might be trying to get on stage. And then there's also this over here on the other side, is what we call longevity, or maybe it's for you and I, it's just simple lifestyle. And the reason why we have a triangle, as they are so far apart from each other, it's the best way to represent it. In other words, if I am in the aesthetic space and I'm trying to cut down, trying to look a certain way and look a certain size going into my season, then what typically happens is I'm focusing on my diet and I'm focusing on getting into a calorie restriction. Whereas the person who's chasing performance isn't after that. They're after performance, so they're more than likely going to be, this is like maybe the low carb person, hypothetically speaking. This person is the higher carb because they're using the carbohydrates to go in and to fuel that performance before they go into that game or go into that heavier load of training. The longevity guy over here, well, they're not necessarily in a deficit and they're not necessarily in a surplus. They're trying to maintain a balance or a lifestyle, and it might be that they are dead set in that Mediterranean diet and they are got their food dialed in and they're walking and they're sleeping and they're getting adequate rest and they're doing a little bit of activity but a lot of recovery. So that each of those sides of the triangle is different. So seasonality is like that. In my season, my efforts are all about the outcome or the goal or going after it. In my post-season, I'm going to come off. Now, I don't advocate, like you will typically stereotypically see these guys that are bodybuilders coming off stage and then ho-hoing down donuts. You see the professional athlete doesn't do that. That just looks good for Instagram, right? The good professional athlete who's in this as part of their lifestyle is coming off. They're having a small break, but they are working on post-season, coming back down to a place where potentially they're looking to help their metabolism restore and get ready, so that when they go into their off season might be a bulking season. It's not necessarily going to be a cutting season. It might be a season to bulk or to put on size, so that way when they go back up into their pre-season, they're starting to get ready to implement those other more stringent things like this diet and cutting, so that when they're ready to get on stage, they're not having to crash diet. Okay, a footballer, his off-season might be, I'm not doing much cardio, I want to get stronger, I want to become a monster whenever I get back on that court of that field. Therefore, I'm going to do a couple of things. I might want to put on some size. I might want to put on some muscle. Why muscle? Because simply in their eyes, they're not thinking about longevity tissue. They're thinking about muscle's going to help protect me when I do take that next hit. If I am a 220, 250 pound monster and I am running at you, and you're a 160 pound, wringing wet winger, whatever the case is, and I'm coming at you at the same pace that you're coming at me, and I hit you, it's going to be like a freight train going over a go-kart. So therefore, that's the off-season as an example, and that person, and they may be, again, eating in a calorie surplus, they may be focusing a hell of a lot more on their sleep and recovery, because in the in-season, they may not get that chance because they've not only got training, but they've got games and they've got travel. Whereas off-season, I'm likely to actually institute more of that. So therefore, I'm prepping my body for what is a busy period of time whilst I'm playing. In actual fact, I'm probably enduring more stress during that period of time than I am elsewhere. So that's just a couple of examples. So what I'm talking about this now is executing in phases. So go back to the program that you've done. Have you instituted some phases? Okay, do you have an in-season? Do you have a post-season, a pre-season? Do you have an off period where you are not doing something? Okay, it might be I'm taking some time away from the diet. I'm just going to eat, not if it fits your macros, not flexible dieting. I'm just going to eat. I'm just going to put whatever's on the table. I know that I'm just going to eat it. I'm going to enjoy it, but I'm going to keep training. And therefore, I'm going to free my mind away from the triggers of what happens whenever I see things on the plate. Now, as I said before, and I said the last couple of days, I do have a simple template that I've put together for someone who is new, who is either coming off the sidelines, completely brand new, wants to start from scratch. It is a PDF. It is something that will give you an idea of what I would talk about if I was to map out a 1 year for a person. And then that's their starting point. From there, we then customize it. We individualize it for that person, depending upon what their goal, what part of the peak or pinnacle of the triangle that they are after. And then we institute all those other things. And it might look like a lot, but the reality is, you and I both know, you do all this stuff anyway. Nothing is ever that simple, but it looks complicated until we implement it. And then in my case, we use what we call the rules of three, which we'll talk about later, to start implementation. So today, execute in phases. Go back to those drafts that we've done the last couple of days, fill it in, or if you want to have a look, it's easy, comment below blueprint and I will send you that. All I will get from you is a bit of a chat going on, name, detail, what's your goal, so I've got an idea, and then we'll get that information out to you. That's it. Plan's about to come over, time to go, execute in phases, and think about the seasons.